Good morning and welcome to Startup Grind Eastern Ontario. It's such a pleasure to be with you for what is going to be a very insightful, inspiring, and motivating conversation with a very special guest. Thanks so much for being here. And as you're entering today, I can already see some comments in the chat. Love it. And that's highly encouraged. I mean, in this virtual world, the only way that we really get a chance to interact in settings like this is through the comments. We love hearing, some of your favorite takeaways throughout the conversation today. If you have questions throughout, please put them in the conversation. If I don't get to them right away, I will definitely revisit them towards the end of the chat as well. So welcome, everyone. Thanks so much. And we really appreciate the enthusiasm already. Today's event is brought to you by Spark Centre, a regional innovation center in Durham region. As the Eastern Ontario chapter of Startup Grind, Spark Centre is thrilled to bring you these monthly events to inspire, motivate, and challenge you. I'm grateful to have actually had a personal relationship with Spark Centre as a former client myself, just speaking to the space that they provide, this inspiring space for entrepreneurs, building a real community, offering advisory services, and so much more. So love that Startup Grind's taking the lead on hosting. Love that Spark Centre is taking the lead on hosting events like Startup Grind. This is such a great opportunity to bring us all together and to learn from a really inspiring guest. So my name is Katie Zeppieri, and I am the founder of the MicDrop Agency. We are an upstart PR agency. We just started in November of 2021, and we have been rapidly growing and expanding ever since. We provide PR services to both companies as well as high-profile individuals and help them amplify their message through media relations, professional speaking opportunities, and marketing consulting. And our guest today, I'm proud to say, is actually someone who we represent at MicDrop. So as we're chatting today, the other way that you can connect, I think it's a great opportunity to meet other people in this comment section. Don't be afraid to put your LinkedIn in the chat or even your Instagram handle. Invite people to come check out what you're doing. We'd love to hear what business you're working on, what business you're building. Put that all in the chat. It's great insight, and it gives even us as the interviewer and Andrea, our guest today, a chance to kind of learn a little bit more about who's in the audience, so we can sort of tailor our responses and speak to you specifically. Before we begin, we would like to thank Spark Centre's elite partners, Bearskin and Parr LLP, Finance Without Borders, RDP Associates, Leighton and Suresh Law. And I want to remind you all that even after our conversation today, the party doesn't end, okay? There is networking that's taking place directly following this conversation. And if you haven't tried the networking feature before on the Hopin platform, it's pretty cool. It's fun, it's easy, it's a great way to meet some new faces, almost like a speed networking kind of event. You really get a chance to meet people that maybe you haven't before and have a conversation, but you never know where that might lead. Well, at this time, I want to take a moment and introduce our guest. Andrea Dalzell is the People's Disability Rights Advocate. As someone who has used a wheelchair full-time since the age of 12, she understands what it's like to constantly come up against barriers because life is built for the non-disabled. She challenges this narrative daily as the seated nurse, her Instagram handle, one of the phrases that she sort of has embraced and used for so much good, the seated nurse. The first and only registered nurse in a wheelchair in all of New York State. Andrea's advocacy has won her national recognition over the years, including being named New Mobility's Person of the Year in 2021. She has also been featured in publications such as Unite Spinal, Home Care, and Forbes. Please help me welcome Andrea.
Hello.
Yes. Hi. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
This is such a great opportunity, Andrea, to have this fireside chat with you. You're a wealth of information. And what I'm excited about most today, I think, is that we're going to get into, your journey that led you to where you are today as an entrepreneur, as an influencer, doing such incredible work. And I know that everybody's really inspired to hear what you have to say. So first off, let's comment on where you are, because you have some interesting things going on in your home life right now. Where are you currently?
I am in Brooklyn, so big up to the Brooklyn Bridge behind me. I'm staying in a hotel for the next 2 weeks because my house is under massive construction, and it has made it inaccessible for me to stay at home. So I've moved into a hotel until that construction is done.
Oh, wow. Construction reno is always a good time, but glad you got that little inspo picture in the background of the Brooklyn Bridge.
Brooklyn. Actually, a little funny thing is I took a very empowering picture right on that side of the Brooklyn Bridge that went viral 3 years ago.
There you
So
go.
I think it's like picture perfect to be sitting here with you guys today and then have this visual in my background. Yes.
Good hotel choice, meant to be. So, there's so much to dive into. I think what I'd like to even just have you comment on to begin, you have been on quite a journey, and we're going to go through some of those layers. How do you sort of sum up the journey that you've been on? If you were to kind of reflect looking back, what are some of the words and phrases that come to mind for you on how your journey has been that's led you to where you are today?
Exhausting. Which journey isn't? Whatever journey you're on, whether it's climbing Mount Everest or trying to get onto a New York City train, it's tiring. So, for everyone listening, yes, whatever journey you're on from young to now, it is tiring. And when you look back, you actually get to see all of that hard work and take some pride and be proud that you've accomplished so much. So yeah, it's been exhausting, but I am prideful and I'm so excited that I have made it this far and have so much further to go.
Yes, indeed. And you wear many titles. You have many titles. How would you describe yourself if somebody asked you, who are you, Andrea? Like, what do you do?
Who am I? I am extremely ambitious and don't believe that the impossible is supposed to stay impossible, right? So when you think about me going from being a child that was diagnosed with illness that left me a wheelchair user at a very young age and dealing with a healthcare system and having to grow up and deal with my disability very early, and then transitioning into education and figuring out how education is really going to help me, and then transitioning into being a pageant girl and trying to create a platform and think about what my next step would actually be and what that platform would do and how that platform could grow to becoming that first nurse in a wheelchair all of New York State, to then facing those obstacles that come with nursing with a disability. And now 5 degrees later, being here with you guys, it's a journey. It's an ambitious journey. It's a journey that you have to sit back for 1 second and kind of realize that everything is connected and every decision you make doesn't necessarily need to be the right decision, but it's a growing platform, right? Your life is evolving and you have to learn how to grow and evolve. And I'll take that word from Meghan Markle because her podcast started this week and I've been listening to it and it's been amazing. And yeah, I think that's where I'm at. I'm in the evolve of ambition.
Really like that. Now, so much about the decisions that you made, like every life experience that comes our way, the good and the bad, as you say, shapes us. One of the most sort of pivotal moments really in your life that dictated so many more choices to come for you was receiving this diagnosis at the age of 12. And it's not like you were so young that you wouldn't remember. You would definitely at 12 years old remember what that felt like. Can you take us into that moment? Did you fully grasp the diagnosis when you heard it? How did your family react? And what were some of your initial feelings?
Yeah, so I was actually diagnosed at 5, but my life changed at 12 when I became a full-time wheelchair user. So hearing doctors say you're not going to walk again was one of those impact moments of saying, what do you mean I'm not going to walk again? I don't like that. Who can fathom that thought process? I don't think any human being who's walking around right now can ever fathom the words being told to them that you're never going to walk again. It's something that we don't process. We don't even think about disability in our own day-to-day lives. So for me to hear those words as a teenager going into high school, I'm like, what? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. My parents were like, what does this mean for school? Does this mean she won't be able to go? Like, how does she live her life? And not because people don't live everyday lives with disability, but because representation isn't there. My parents had nothing to grasp from. They're immigrants from South America. I'm a first generation born American. My parents had no idea what disability meant. I would be the only one in my family with a visible disability that now we have to learn how to navigate, where there is no representation. There's not something that you look on TV and see yourself. Now it may be a little bit different, but back then you're not opening magazines, Cosmopolitan, and seeing women in chairs. I'm 12 years old and I'm looking at, Jet magazine, and I'm not seeing artists look like me. So what does the world then expect of me? And something that weighed heavy on me until actually recently, where I just was like, you know what? I'm tired of fighting this. You flip over this lens of self-acceptance, because your self-acceptance is tied to what society sees you as. And in high school, I think that's the hardest part, because you're transitioning. You're transitioning into this young adult. You're trying to figure out hormones and girls and guys and friends and life, and then to have a disability and toggle that around, it was hard. And again, I didn't let it go until very recently.
What do you think kept you sort of moving forward in high school when you find yourself in that situation and you're a full-time wheelchair user? Life obviously changed quite a bit.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that you would say to yourself, or what were some of even the routines or habits that you would do to kind of keep yourself feeling positive, even if sometimes it was really hard to do?
So I'm going to tell you a little story, and it kind of shaped the trajectory of where I am today. In high school in New York City, if you have a disability, they will send a yellow school bus to the front of your home. You get on the bus, you go straight to the school, they let you off right in front of the school, and then vice versa to go home. Well, I was a part of a group of kids that went to after school. They had basketball. I wasn't able to attend. And then one day, a friend of mine said to me, Andrea, why don't you come to get breakfast with us in the morning? Because I always used to ask them to grab me breakfast since I wasn't able to go. And I said, yeah, okay, maybe I'll try it. I got off the bus that morning and I tried to go, and the principal stopped me and said, no, you have to go inside. You're not allowed to go with the other students. I said, why? And they were like, well, you have a disability. Once you get onto school property, it's a liability if anything happens to you. I was like, well, what happens to the other kids if they come onto school property and they can leave? And I was always an inquisitive kid. I always asked why. We asked why. Well, I was that kid that never stopped asking why. And the principal then said to me, well, it is what it is. I didn't accept that answer. I went to my mom and she was like, okay, go off the bus tomorrow and see what they do. And I got off the bus the next day, and instead of waiting for someone to tell me no, I beelined to the corner. And I rolled as fast as I could to get to the corner store. So they're not going to follow me. So I get my breakfast and I come back and I get pulled from class to go to the principal's office. And I say to the principal, call my mom. My mom said that I can go. And they call my mom and they were like, this can't happen. She takes the school bus. It has to, there's procedures and protocol. And my mom said, then give her a Metro card. And on the speaker of the phone, my mom says to me in front of everyone, Andrea, if you are late one day to school, you're going to go back on the yellow bus. And I said, okay, got it. I was never late, even in the snow, the rain, the hail that happens in New York City. I was never late to school because I was never getting back on that bus. But that's the thing. I was able to control what I wanted for myself, and I got the support from my family. Whereas someone else who doesn't know me was telling me no because of policy and protocol, red tape. Who puts in red tape? Other people. And usually it's other people who cannot see someone else's human design and understand their nature. So again, now I'm getting off the bus every day, getting the regular city bus and getting breakfast with my friends and staying after school, and now understanding what it is to be responsible for my disability and for my time. So that moves the needle now. I'm no longer subjected to someone else's perception of what I need to do and how I need to do it. And now, moving forward, I can understand what my needs are and the time limitations for my needs, and then making sure that, I can grow. That was just the one pivotal moment that changed everything. So from high school to college, now knowing that, okay, how much time do I need to get there? How much time, if something happens, if I get a flat tire on my chair, if, because now I'm consciously thinking, even today, I never want to be on that yellow school bus.
That's the thread. That's the lingering thread.
That's the lingering thread. Like, so for me, it's not the yellow school bus anymore, but I don't want to be marked late at work, right? I don't want to see that on my timestamp. I don't want to delay something that could possibly hinder someone's health, being that I'm a nurse. So all of those things were literally impacted by that moment in time.
I remember you telling me for the first time, and it really stopped me and made me reflect. You commented on how if you're a non-disabled person, it's almost like you don't fully grasp what the world looks like through a disabled person's eyes.
Oh, yeah.
Everything about just the logistics of getting to and fro to places looks completely different. And you were commenting on how, because of that, it's almost like you don't have the same amount of time as non-disabled people in your day. It means that you're so many logistics and so many things. Take us into that. Like, what does that actually look like on a day-to-day basis?
Mm-hmm. Let's see. New York City. I grew up in New York City, right? And there's 1,000,001 train stations. And out of all those train stations, only 20% of them have an elevator. And out of 20% of them, only 15% of them are working at any given time. So if an elevator is working in the morning, that elevator may not be working in the afternoon. So when I was going to school in Staten Island, my commute was about 4 hours. And the reason why was because I would have to roll 10 blocks to the nearest elevator. That elevator, if it was out in the morning, I would have to then take a bus to go 7 stops down to get the next elevator. Then get onto the train, take that train to another train, get off, get an elevator if there's an elevator. If not, I have to bypass that elevator to get to another one, take a bus back to the ferry, take a 45-minute ride over the ferry to Staten Island, and then get on a bus, and then a bus for 45 minutes to school. Whereas if you didn't have a disability, you take one train to the ferry, to the bus, to school. So it becomes an hour and 30-minute process versus a 4-hour just like journey to get there. And I did that every day going to the College of Staten Island. I had an 8 a.m. class, and I was literally leaving home at 4 or 4:30 in the morning. And
Wow.
I wouldn't get out of class until 10 o'clock at night, and then get home at 2 o'clock in the morning when elevators were out.
Wow.
So that's just a snippet of a journey. But that's thinking about New York City. Let's say you don't live in New York City. Let's say you live anywhere else. Just walking. If you go outside and walk on your sidewalks, how can someone with wheels get off your sidewalk if you don't have a ramp? Right? So that's just simple thinking. If they have to now turn back because they can't get off of that curb cut, how much time are you adding to their journey? And that's just walking on a simple pathway like anyone else. And not every pathway has that curb cut for a wheelchair to go down. So we're thinking about universal access. And how much time do we add to someone's day if they can no longer just get down the curb cuts across the street?
Wow. It's eye-opening when you describe it like that, and just the commitment that you had to go to school and a 4-hour commute each way. That's a full day,
Mm-hmm.
Extra day spent just on your commute to go make this happen. Wow. Now let's talk about your journey into college. At what point did you decide that you wanted to get into nursing?
Ooh, I never wanted to be a nurse. It wasn't until I was auditing medical school classes and I realized that the medical model, no matter where you are in the world, is very dedicated to the disease process. So when people go into the doctor's office and you say, oh, they don't even see me. They just see me as my diagnosis. That's exactly what it is, because it's how your diagnosis is working in your body. And that's how the medical model is supposed to treat you. Uh, I could never go into someone's room and say, you will never be able to walk again. I could never do it. I'll never be able to say to someone, you won't be able to do something that you love again. And that's because my perception of disability is not in the same perception of someone who's able. Usually, when someone who is able is giving someone a diagnosis, it's like as if saying your disability is equaling a death sentence, when we know that's not the case, especially today when technology has boomed to the point of being able to advance what people with disabilities are able to do almost on an equal playing field. And it really just comes down to perception and red tape and gatekeeping that changes all of that. So nursing encompasses all of that human design into healthcare. We think about the whole picture. And it wasn't until I realized I didn't want to tell someone that they can't, that someone said to me, well, what about nursing? Again, it took me a year. I applied for the entrance exam a year before I actually applied. And then I applied on the very last day that the application was due.
Wow.
And that was due to representation. I never saw all of my teams. 37 surgeries in my life, which means I've probably come across more than 200 nurses and medical personnel, and not one of them had a disability that I can see, physically see. So, of course, subconsciously, I don't think I could be a nurse in a wheelchair. So at that time frame, I think it was me trying to navigate what nursing would look like for me until I just said, I'm never going to find the answers, just do it.
Do you think you, at this point, realized that you would be advocating for representation in nursing? I mean, you advocate for representation in a wide variety of ways, but do you think it, like at that early of a stage when you're in nursing school, we're thinking like, I'm going to be speaking for nurses who maybe are disabled, or were you just kind of doing your thing? And it's almost like it wasn't until you got into the workforce that you realized that there was such a need for this.
Oh no, it was from day one. It literally, my first nursing school orientation day, my professors came up to me and said, we don't think you can be a nurse with a disability, like literally because of my chair. And I looked to them and I was like, well, you only have to educate me because that's a part of the ADA here, right? So the Americans with Disabilities Act here is like, no, you just have to educate me. I can figure out everything else. And at the time, I thought very much that I was going to be a bedside nurse. And I felt all of the obstacle and all of the pushback from day one of school. And then after it, I look back at all of my textbooks. I'm looking through everything and I'm realizing disability is not mentioned anywhere. Again, we're following this medical model where we're only thinking about the diagnosis and the process of that diagnosis and not thinking about how disability will affect that person's life. And the way we talk about it is negatively. So therefore, that person is now going to perceive whatever I'm saying negatively about their illness. And that's not how this should work. Nurses should be able to go to work and not have to, how do you say, parallel nurses being healthy. That's not, no one. We're the same human beings as anyone walking the world. So therefore, why is it that we're putting this emphasis that healthcare must equal healthy? That means you don't have any mental issues, you don't have any cognitive issues, no physical issues. Like, that's absurd to think that human beings are going to be so perfect to care for every single person else that's ill. Like, no, we're going to have our own issues. And how do we deal with those issues in the workplace, especially in healthcare? And I realized that that fight was going to be way bigger once I finished school.
And you finished school. You pushed your way through. You know, even to imagine being on orientation. I'm just putting myself in your shoes and thinking, like, imagine being at your orientation and people telling you that, like, you're not going to be able to do this. But you, which is a very common theme in your life story thus far, and I know will continue, you are not somebody who settles for someone else telling you what is possible for you. You're someone who determines that for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so you not only graduated, but you then began your job search and were looking for that first nursing job. What was that experience like for you?
Oh man, let's throw it back 4 years. School was hard. And then coming out of school, I thought I was going to have all of this support from my professors and clinical and everywhere else that has seen me now accomplish what they thought was impossible. So I've completed the impossible. I've made it possible. And that means I should have all of these recommendations to be able to find a job. Well, I started work very like within 3 months after I passed my boards. I did become a health director for a respite camp, but I was particularly wanting to be an ICU nurse, and I wanted to be a pediatric ICU nurse and give back the way that those pediatric nurses cared for me when I had first gotten my diagnosis. And I just wanted that. And I was like, I'm going to be a pediatric ICU nurse. And I started to think about what I can do with my future. And I was like, oh, I can become a CRNA, which is a certified registered nurse anesthetist, meaning that we'll be like an anesthesiologist. And it's a great field, and I would love to be in it. And then I'm like, okay, what are the requirements? I have to have 100 and something hours of clinical hours. And my jobs were all desk jobs. So that doesn't mean that I'm going to get the clinical hours needed to get into that position. So 1 interview to 10, I'm starting to put in for just clinical positions. So that's like hospitals, clinics, dialysis centers, just trying to get those clinical hours. And 76 interviews later, I was rejected from all of them, all clinical practice. And I didn't know which way to go in order to get the clinical hours that I needed, not only now for just going into the profession that I wanted, but also to continue my higher education. And I'm like, if I can't get my clinical hours, where does that leave me in my career field? Because then I'm just going to stay at the lowest POTA for my RN degree. And as a person with as a person with a disability, we know that the cost of living is higher. There's a disability tax that's there. So I would lose out on all of my resources that I needed for my healthcare, staying at the bottom without and not be able to pay for everything that I needed because I'd be in the middle. And I had no idea what to do. I literally was freaking out.
Oh my gosh, 76 interviews.
76 interviews.
76 interviews, you heard no.
Rejected.
Rejected.
Or I would hear, "Oh, we love you. We can't wait. You'll hear from HR on Friday." And Friday would come, no call. I would call on Monday and they would say, "Oh, it's still pending." And a month later it would be still pending. Or in 3 weeks later it would be like, "Oh, they've decided to move on with another candidate." And people will say, "Well, how do you know it's bias?" And I'm like, "Well, I just graduated with a cohort and I was the one that was applying to the same jobs that they were applying to. So we have the same based education, and I wouldn't get the job even though I have more experience, life experience, and healthcare experience than they do, and they would get the job." Or I would go in for an interview the day before and they would go on an interview the day after and have a completely different interview experience. So in New York State, we are allowed to record. One person just needs to know. So I would record all of my interviews and go back to an interview coach because I thought that I just sucked at being an interviewer. Like I was like, I probably just don't know how to speak. I probably don't know how to deliver what I need to deliver. And my interview coach is like, no, you did perfectly. This is strictly based on perception.
Because you, at this point in time, you're right. I've never seen a nurse in a wheelchair before. So you were coming in and, really changing up how people even think about nurses. Yeah. So 76 rejections. So for everyone in the audience here today, entrepreneurship is, as we all know, filled with no's, right? That is what this journey looks like. We're trying new ideas, we're pitching things, we're, coming up with concepts, and most won't work.
A lot.
A lot won't work. We'll hear the no's. But I just feel like Andrea reminds us that pushing past and continuing to put yourself out there eventually pays off. Because it was the 77th interview where it became a yes for you.
It was, and that is because of the pandemic, right? So all of this negative came from the pandemic, but my positive was that when New York City was hit, our governor called for nurses to come out of retirement. So if you're asking for nurses to come out of retirement, you must have a need for a nurse with a disability. I remember a hospital system put up their HR number begging for nurses to just call, and they will schedule whatever shift you wanted, and just please come in. And I called, I left a message. They called me back 15 minutes later, said, please come in tomorrow. And this whole time, I have this gut wrenching feeling that everything's going to fall through. I'm going to just face another rejection. Once you face 76 rejections, you're used to rejection. Okay, fine. You know, uh, but in my gut, my yes is stronger than anyone else's no. So I knew that I just needed to continue. And if rejection came, I already knew what rejection felt like. It was just going to be like how much rejection I was willing to put up with. So 100 was my marker at that time. If I can get to 100 interviews and I got rejected from 100, I would reevaluate where I wanted to go. 77 comes because of the pandemic. I go in the next day, I get my credentials, and I'm like, well, that was just HR. A nurse manager hasn't seen me yet. So the ball could still drop. The first day on the floor, a nurse manager comes up to me and she says, I don't think you could be a nurse on this unit. Have you ever worked in clinical practice? And I said, I've done all of my clinicals throughout school, as well as having 37 different operations, which I can tell you A to Z how to work every single machine in this hospital. And she just looked at me and I was like, and I said, you can go to HR. They hired me. You can let them know that you feel uncomfortable and they can discuss with me, but I don't think it's appropriate to do this now while I'm about to care for patients at the beginning of my shift, unless you want to go to HR now. And she kind of left me alone. And to be honest, I was holding my breath the whole time I was saying it to her because one, I don't like confrontation. And two, I don't like having to explain myself and my ability to someone who already has a preconceived notion about what my ability is. I think it's very unfair to that person. So for those listening to me, please, always have this open mind when you're interacting with someone because you should be meeting people where they are, and not allowing for an uncomfort to fall upon someone else just based on perception. So I got through it and I worked the entire pandemic. It's funny enough that I got all of this recognition because I became the first ICU nurse to work from my chair during the pandemic. And at the height of it in New York City. And people are like, what, ICU nurse? Like, how did she do CPR? How does she do all these things? And I'm like, again, representation. You don't see how it can be done, so you automatically think it can't be done. And I'm here saying, nope, give me a chance. I'll show you.
Wow. Wow. And so like that's an interesting comment too, is COVID happens, there's a big need for nurses. Here's the opportunity. And I think that that's a great part of your story too, because it's like, I think the saying goes something along the lines of luck is when like preparation meets opportunity.
Yes.
And you had been preparing, you were working hard, you were ready.
I
And
was ready.
the opportunity presented itself and you got in there and you proved that you could do everything and more.
And more.
And more and more. And for everyone again listening, just a reminder, what if Andrea had stopped at her 75th, 76th
Or
interview?
30th or 10th. Some people feel like rejection is so downing that they don't even know how to move forward. That first rejection can literally turn someone off. That fifth rejection can turn someone off, let alone 77th or 76. I think it's really important to understand what your yes is. And that's always been my message. What is your yes? And if you are convicted in your yes, no one's no can deter you. And my yes is based on my own ability. You cannot determine that. No one else can determine what you can and cannot do or what your mind can get you to do. So therefore, why allow someone else's mind to dictate that for you? And I just never allowed for that to happen to me. And I can credit my parents for that because, again, they're immigrants to this country. They had to make a life for themselves here. And here they are dealing with a child with a disability who they've never had to do something like this before. And they're navigating waters that they've never navigated before. So my parents set that example to realize that I have a voice and my voice matters. And you have to fight for it and don't allow someone else's voice to be louder than yours. So yeah, my yes is louder than anyone else's no.
Yes, that is a quotable right there. That's a tweetable. If anybody's on Twitter right now, that's a great one to put out. And so along this journey, you're going through this process, you're applying, you get your job, COVID, very busy time, right? Especially busy time for the medical field. At what point in this journey did pageants enter into your world, and how did that even come about?
Yeah, so that was a little bit before my nursing world. I was Miss Wheelchair New York 2015, but
Wow.
before I was even crowned, uh, I was approached by a young lady with a disability who said to me, "You're so good at being able to speak up when something is wrong." And at that point in time, I was working with a young women's group. Um, I wasn't even working with them. I was a part of the group, and I just didn't like the way they were talking to people. They were talking down to us like we were kids. And we were all women and adults, and just because we have disabilities doesn't mean you should speak to us or demean us. And I would say something back, and they were like, "No, you're a program member, so this is how it is." And I'm like, I didn't like this. And the young lady said to me, "Well, you should be an advocate, and you should be Miss Wheelchair New York." And I was like, "Well, what's that?" And she's like, "It's an advocacy platform for women in New York." And I was like, "Okay, sure." I again didn't think much of it at the time, but this young woman was persistent to the point of printing out the application and handing it to me and giving me a pen and say, "Do it now, and I'll mail it for you."
Wow.
Yeah, and I was like, "No, I'll do it." And I filled it out, and it sat on my kitchen table. And I have this terrible history of waiting for things to be the last minute before I hand them in. So it was literally a day before, and I handed in the application. I got accepted to come up and speak and give a speech and go through the interview process, and I did that. And during my speech, I remember speaking about how women with disabilities are often told they are heard and listened to, but society perception says different. And the judges at that moment, one of them particularly was, she had a disability herself, and she looked up at me, and she heard that line, and I connected with her while I was on that stage. And the moment she looked at me, I think I already felt that crown was going to be on my head.
Wow.
Because it was a moment. It was a moment where everyone in the crowd was like, "Wait, my perceptions are wrong?" "Yes, your perceptions are wrong." Like, what do you mean? And for that judge who had a disability to maybe hear something for the first time that she was feeling and didn't know how to actually put into words was an ultimate connection. So, yeah, it changed the way I thought about my advocacy and who I could advocate for. And then my platform was life, liberty, and the pursuit of access. So we know that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness pertains to everyone, but access to happiness does not. Whether you're a minority, whether you have a disability, whether you're a woman, whether you're a male who may have some type of background that prohibits you from getting to a point where you want to be, we all have this issue. Mine just happens to be so substantial that I can't even access happiness because it's limited in universal access in general.
Wow. And this was really, would you say the pageants kind of kickstarted your influencer career? It maybe gave you this new platform to kind of go around and speak on topics that you were speaking about in your own circles, but now it was a bit of a bigger way.
Uh, yeah, I think so. Because when I had just become Miss Wheelchair New York and talking about my platform, Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Access, that's how I got into O Magazine with Oprah. That's how, I was able to then navigate what that actually meant in the political world. And I started doing a little bit more lobbying, not so much influencer or creator world, but talking to high level officials and telling them these issues ahead of time before they had to face it, where they had to actually make a deal or make a different type of understanding and put in some laws that would protect those who are vulnerable. And having that particular education and experience to go to Washington, D.C. and talk to our congressional members shifted the narrative into more influencer content creator side, because I went from this hardcore advocacy with people who would not understand, who couldn't understand, or didn't know how to really implement bills and laws, to saying, okay, I can't be the only voice anymore. where can I get my voice, and shifting to social media, and then taking that platform to social media and saying, I need your voice too in order to make this happen.
And if you're not already following Andrea at The Seated Nurse on Instagram, I highly recommend that you check out her page. I came across Andrea during the pandemic, actually, and that's when you and I first had an interview and first had a chat.
Yeah.
And I just remember being so inspired by you, and the messages that she puts out, are inspiring for everyone. It's just a reminder to push past what might be viewed as obstacles in your life and to always keep striving for more. I love that you use the word ambitious. I love that you are ambitious. I love that you're not shy about that. You have big aspirations for your life, and like you've continued to push forward and push the needle forward. And there's still so much more to come that you're working on and building right now. So, I mean, I'm inspired by that. And I think for everyone who's here today, it would be really helpful to have you speak to one other topic that you do speak about often, which is the 3 strikes.
Yes.
I want you to bring that up for a couple reasons, because there are people from all walks of life today here in this chat. People who are new immigrants to Canada, people who come from all different sorts of backgrounds, and each person, has their own journey to go through and are faced with their own set of obstacles. And many on this chat are trying to build their business and trying to get something off the ground. Just like you, they have goals and that they're working towards. So tell us about the 3 strikes that you feel like were some of the challenges in many ways that you've had to overcome and live through, and how that would relate to maybe somebody who's listening today facing their own set of challenges. What advice you'd give to them?
Yeah. So back in high school, that bus story comes back. It was a snowstorm in New York City, and school was let out early. And I had already called my dad to come pick me up. And I'm waiting for him to come to the school and get me. And the dean passes, and she's like, why didn't you tell me you needed a school bus to get home? I said, I already took care of my stuff. And she's like, a pretty face will only get you so far in life. You have 3 strikes against you already. And I didn't know what she meant by that, but she was like, you are a Black girl, a woman, and have a disability. You'll be lucky if you get through junior college. And I didn't know that at the time. I didn't even realize my own 3 strikes at the moment. I'm in high school. I'm not thinking about that. But those words stuck with me. They were my 3 strikes. They were my lightning bolts, not to empower me, not to give me energy, but to set me ablaze in a negative way, right? To burn me down and to remind me that I have a place in the world. And my place was not to be among those who are considered elite because of these 3 strikes that she's mentioned. Her ability to see past the point that I can care for myself, she had to figure out a way to get me down. And I took those 3 strikes and I said, okay. And they played on me for a while where my grades went down. I couldn't figure out what that next move would be until I graduated high school, and my doctor shows up to my graduation and he writes in my memory book, please, anything but a lawyer. Just remember, impossible just turns possible when you're the one to make it the first.
Wow.
So that's the extra line. You guys are a little bit special because I've never actually read out that whole line from my memory book to anyone. Now you usually just say, please, anything but a lawyer. But no, he was like, you create the possibility when you're the first. And that's when I took those 3 strikes, and I'm like, I am going to be that powerhouse of a woman that happens to be Black and just happens to have a disability too, and run with that, and not allow again for someone else's negative perception of me to bring me down because my yes is bigger. And it took a doctor seeing that, someone who has been in my own care. It could have been a family member. It could have been anyone else. It could have just been myself to pull me from that negative connotation. But I ran with that. I took his words because he's seen me through my most vulnerable states and my breakdown moments when I couldn't bear the pain anymore. To hear me now taking these 3 strikes and using it as that same lightning bolt to be able to electrify a conversation to start, to be able to say, why not? To be able to say, how come not me? And why not me?
Yes.
I
That
think
is beautiful. Like, and just to have that connection of somebody who knows you so personally to be able to kind of like just make a comment like that, I'm quite sure that's going to stay with you forever.
he's not my doctor anymore, but we are a good team to this day. And, it's always that matter of remembering that impossible becomes possible when you decide that you want it to be. And you have to just allow it to change the narrative. So someone tried to demean me, and I took that same 3 strikes that was supposed to burn me to the ground and used it to electrify other people. And my 3 strikes are now paving a path for someone else to be able to follow me and be able to say, well, if she has done it, I can do it too.
Yes, 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 and yes. Wow. We are getting to the tail end of our conversation, our fireside chat today with Andrea. Loving these comments in the chat here. Nada says, such a positive attitude you have, made you a successful one. It's so inspiring to hear your story. Well done. Glad to hear about the journey that you've had. People just thanking you, saying how brave you are, hardworking. Awesome comments in this chat. If you all have any questions, now's a chance to put them in this chat so we can get to them in the last few minutes here. Just for my own curiosity, Andrea, is there a reason why you said anything but a lawyer?
So when I was younger, I used to tell my doctors that I was going to be a lawyer and come back and sue them for all the pain that they have put me through.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh!
And
Okay.
this started at like 5 years old. I already knew like lawyers. I have them in my family, so I knew about like the legal system. And I would literally say to my doctors if they would like hurt me or I'd be crying, I'd be like, I'm gonna sue you. You wait till I'm a lawyer. And yeah.
Okay.
So I
Your
used to
doctor
tell,
cut jokes. Your doctor
yeah.
cut jokes.
Yeah, I was literally just like, I'm gonna come back, and if you can't beat them, join them.
Do you all?
Yeah, right. Like,
I love that. That adds a lot of color to that story. Okay, so I mean, since and beyond that, you were recognized by the Craig Nielsen Foundation, and in 2020, they granted you the Visionary Award, which included a $1 million prize. And in an admirable yet unsurprising move for you, you used half of that reward to start a nonprofit titled The Seated Position, which aims to raise money and awareness for people living with disabilities. So not only do you have this nonprofit, you also recently became a managing partner for the Access Project, a center in New York whose mission is to motivate people with physical disabilities to pursue a healthy, active lifestyle. Now, this takes us into your, not only are you the nurse pushing through, not only are you the pageant queen telling your story, not only are you the influencer, spreading inspiration, but you're also now building organizations, things that are larger than even just your story. They're impacting, so many people. Why was it important for you to start a nonprofit? Why was it important for you to become a managing partner of the Access Project?
well, for one, I can't allow for someone else to face what I have faced throughout my journey. There were no resources. There was no one for me to turn to. There was no one that looked like me that I can actually say, how does this work? And even if it wasn't disability related, another woman who may be a minority in healthcare had no idea how to help me. And I was like, there's so many different areas in healthcare and no one can help me. Am I supposed to be alone in this? And I realized that if I had gone through this journey and I had stayed silent, no one else would come behind me, or there would be years in between someone else getting to the point where I'm at today. And I can't allow for that to happen because, again, our country is shifting. Our world is shifting. The way we interact is shifting. And if we're not intentional about the way we move in order to empower others, then the way the internet is now will be this way in 50 years, in 100 years. So it's extremely important for me to not only be a managing partner for a different organization, but to have my own, so that I can facilitate those conversations the way that they should be had. I can have a resource and a pinpoint for others who may be looking, especially for keywords. We all know how to use hashtags. We all know how to use @ symbols now. If I can't hashtag or look up online nurse in a wheelchair and see some stock photos versus seeing reality, then again, you're going to have someone that's sitting there thinking it's never going to happen. And then that progress isn't going to move forward. When you have an idea, trust and believe that your idea may be inclusive to you, and others may have something similar, but don't know how to act on it, and you do. That is the difference between a generator and an executor. I can be the generator of ideas, but if I don't know how to execute, I can't get it out there to the people, and therefore no one else knows how to do it, and therefore they get stuck too, and it's never going to happen. So how do then we move forward? And if I've gotten all of this recognition behind me, and I have all of these people now willing to listen and help, I'm going to utilize that advantage. I'm going to take advantage of my friends. I'm going to take advantage of all the ones that say they want to help. Yes, please, I need your help, because this is bigger than me. And I want it to be bigger than just my nonprofit or a managing partner position. The point of a nonprofit is for it to be extinct at some point. So this problem will go away. And I can't make it go away alone. Like I said before, it's going to be with other people helping me. So I had to create that space for them to come and help.
Yes. So I love that for anybody who's tuning in today, you can definitely learn a lot more about the Access Project. I'm going to actually put the spelling here in the chat. You can Google it and learn more on their website about how you might like to maybe get involved or support. Andrea has also been featured in a number of publications. She was also starring in a few commercials, Gillette Venus 2015 commercial, Apple's 2018 Apple Watch campaign, like super cool feature opportunities. Definitely encourage you to go check those out as well. Andrea, I want to ask, because I always love leaving the audience with like some tangible tips and takeaways from you. You're clearly a very productive person. You're busy and you're doing a lot. So what are some of the like habits, routines, favorite apps, maybe even books? What are some of the tools and resources and pieces that fuel you?
Oh, number one, Camcard. If you don't already have this app on your phone, it is a must. You must get it. You do not have to purchase. It is a free app. It is called Camcard. I'll show it to you on the screen if you can see it. It looks like a double. It looks like a double C. It says Camcard on it. So if you can see this app, Camcard.
Camcard.
Yeah, and what I love about it is that it lists all of the business cards I get. So all I have to do is take a picture of it. So one, it's environmentally friendly, and two, it allows me to track business cards based on the dates. So if I know I went to an event and I got a business card and I just can't remember that person's name, I just have to go to the date in my bank card. It's almost like a visible Rolodex, right? We get so many business cards. Sometimes we stick them in our pocket. We don't know where they went. In that moment, they give it to me. I take a picture and it's there. Now I know how to reach out. I can reach out within a week. So that's number one for me. The second thing is having a huge whiteboard calendar that has at least 2 to 3 months written out, so that I can see where spacing is. Time management is key, because for me, with a disability, I have to have downtime. I have to be able to recenter and care for me. And I can't do that with such a busy schedule sometimes. So I definitely have a calendar, whether it's on your Mac, your Windows, whatever it is, that's going to be interconnected through everything, so that you can actually see what your calendar looks like. And always include at least an hour of time in the morning and in the evening to recenter yourself, whether that's getting up to just meditate. Even if you are tired, sit up in bed and meditate. And before you go to sleep, close your phone, close the book, and meditate. Think about your future. Think about your dream. What does that look like? How do you get there? Start to envision it, because when you envision it, it can actually become possible. If you can't envision it, it's not going to go anywhere. So 2 very important things for me. Oh, and stay hydrated. You guys see me drinking water the whole time, right?
Stay hydrated. What a great set of really tangible takeaways there. The Camcard app sounds awesome. We all need those ways to not lose the business card and keep connected. And
that was a free plug. I do not get anything from you guys. Like, I'm just telling you, I love the app.
And I love that. I love that you're also reminding us to take time for ourselves, in our busy days. Well, Andrea, I mean, this was such an incredible conversation. I mean, I've known bits of your story, but to hear you kind of lay it out like this, it just reminds me, all the reasons why you are such a force. And I think like the message that everybody's walking away with here today is that we all get to define what is possible for our lives. And my hope is, and I feel confident that the people here today are going to be that much braver because they heard your story. So thank you
ambitious
for taking the time today.
I'm sorry. Yes.
No, say it loud.
Be ambitious, be intentional, whatever road and journey you're on. If you're tired right now, take a break, and that's okay. Give yourself some time, but envision what you want for your future and be unapologetically ambitious about it. Don't stop.
Yes. Andrea, it was a true pleasure hosting this conversation. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Bye. And all the best with your construction. All right. Wow. What an amazing interview and amazing chat. I always leave these conversations feeling inspired. And to be honest, hearing Andrea today just really took it to the next level in terms of the inspiration that I want to walk away with and the bold actions that I want to take now, just because of hearing what she shared today. So this Startup Grind event was proudly presented by Spark Center. And we want to say thank you again to Spark Center's elite partners, Bearskin and Par LLP, Finance Without Borders, RDP Associates, Leighton, and Suresh Law. The next Startup Grind is taking place on Thursday, September 29th. Save the date. And more details will be released soon. So be sure to keep an eye out on Spark Center's social media pages for details and to register for the next event. These are such great, thought leadership opportunities to just come forward and hear some really powerful stories. Lastly, Spark Center puts out a quarterly magazine called The Spark Business and Innovation Magazine. And the fall 2022 issue, dubbed EN3, is all about the energy, environment, and engineering sectors that are major contributors to the Canadian economy. For major players to cutting-edge startups, the issue looks at how Eastern Ontario gives these critical sectors a boost. And they add tips for energy proofing your home this winter, ones to watch, and more. And EN3 is a deep dive into all the ways we're powering a brighter future. If you'd like to subscribe to receive your free print and or digital copy, visit thesparkmagazine.ca. The media kit is also available on the website if you are interested in advertising within the Spark Magazine. Now it is time for networking, everyone. I hope you've stayed around for that. If you wish to join us, you can navigate to this section by clicking the people icon on the left side of your screen. You'll be paired up with one person at a time for 3 minutes. You can use this time to get to know each other. You have the opportunity to extend if you're really getting into a great conversation. And once the time is up, press ready and hop in will automatically move you to the next person. Click the connect button if you'd like to exchange contact information with anyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a joy to host this chat. I always love hosting these Startup Grind events with all of you. And thanks again for all of the love that you gave Andrea in the chat today. It's been a pleasure. Until next time, enjoy the last few days of your week. Let's make them count. Thank you.